All right, we are going to get started. Mr. Scott Schmidt, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schmidt. May we have a roll call?
Councilmember Duran.
Here.
Councilmember Meister.
Here.
Sorry, Councilmember Heilman.
Here.
Sorry about that. Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Here.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. May we have a report on the closed session agenda, please?
Yes, the City Council convened their closed session meeting at 6 p.m. this evening. There were no public comment. The Council discussed the 2 items listed on the posted agenda, took no reportable action, and adjourned at 6:20 p.m.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, shall we talk about the approval of the agenda? There are no changes from staff this evening. Any changes from any of you?
Mayor, if I may, I'd like to try to add items 5A and B to our consent agenda.
No objection from me.
No objection.
5A is about the transgender visibility events, and 5B is an item on housing for middle-income households, a study of ways to incentivize that development type.
I have a couple of comments, but I'll make them under council member comments.
All right. Any other changes tonight?
Could we move 4A and 4B to consent?
4A is about staffing analysis and optimization plan, and 4B is our 2019-2020 operating budget and discussion of accomplishments. There's plenty to read about both of those, but the agendas are in the back. Without objection?
I have comments about 4A, and I'm not sure if their direction that is different from what.
All right, we can have that item. I think.
We don't have to have a big staff report.
Okay, we'll have that item without a staff report, perhaps. And so, anyone interested in that, take a moment and look at the agenda in the back.
But 4B is moved to consent?
4B is going to consent. Yes. All right.
Mayor, I have a couple. I'd like to pull item 2U for discussion. That's the flavored tobacco item. And may I ask if we can move 6A to consent, the campaign contribution limit?
No objection on moving to U or moving to A? 6A?
Do we have comments
Are there
on 6A?
any
There are no comments
public comments?
There are no comments for 6A, and we have a few comments for 2U that will move to excluded consent.
Okay.
I'd also like to pull 2N from consent. N as in Nancy.
Statutes for equality.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt by Councilmember Heilman, second by Councilmember Duran. Are these working, or should we do it by voice? There we go. All right, we have an agenda. Thank you very much. Any adjournment motions this evening? Councilmember Duran?
I'd like to ask that we adjourn in memory of West Hollywood therapist Amy. Sorry, I'm blanking on the last name right now. I should have written it down.
Here, I can.
I'm sorry, I don't remember her name either.
The famous Supreme Court case.
Harding.
Hardwick, thank you. Amy Hardwick. That's how I was going to remember. That was my mnemonic device, and I lost it. Sadly, Amy was a West Hollywood therapist and tragically murdered by her ex over the weekend. And I know she was a member of our business community, and I'd like to ask that we adjourn in her memory.
Without objection. Councilmember Heilman?
I would request that we adjourn in memory of Mary Griffith, a longtime LGBTQ rights advocate who died recently at 85.
Without objection?
As is our tradition in the city, to adjourn our council meetings in honor of military service personnel who were killed in service to our country since our last meeting. They are Army Specialist Brandon Time Kimball, age 21, Army Sergeant First Class Javier J. Gutierrez, age 28, and Army Sergeant First Class Antonio Ray Rodriguez, age 28.
Thank you very much. Presentations. This evening, we have from an ongoing set of presentations regarding the 19th Amendment. Dee Saunders and members of the Employee African American Heritage Month Committee are going to come and make a presentation. There you are. Are you going to do your presentation first? I think that
You're
would-
in charge, Dee.
Yes. I think it would be best if you did it first, and then we have a proclamation. I want to thank you, take some photos, invite everyone to applaud, all of that.
Okay, perfect. Good evening. My name is Dee Saunders with the Employee African American Heritage Month Committee at the City of West Hollywood. Thank you to the council for the invitation to stand before all of you today and speak on the roles African Americans, especially women, played in voter rights and how the suffrage movement helped us get to where we are today and should continue to inspire all of us to not stop until voter equality is nationwide. My monologue is a diary entry discussing the founding mothers of the suffrage movement, the 19th Amendment, and the present-day issues communities face at the polls. Dear diary, hey girl, hey. I find myself at a constant fork in the road during election season. To vote or not to vote? That is the question. Then I hear my father's voice yelling at me, "This is your right." A right that hasn't always been available to people like me, women, Black women. This year, it will be 100 years that women have had the right to cast a vote at the ballot, and it's only been 55 years that Black women have had that same right. This didn't happen by chance, of course. It was an uphill battle, in the words of my mom. And let's start by giving respect where it is due. Women of color were able to use the template created by white abolitionists to create a space where our issues could be addressed and our voices heard. With unapologetic women like Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, and Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, Black women began to organize across the nation. We had the National Association of Colored Women, which later became known as the National Association of Colored Women's Club, founded by Mary Church Terrell with the popular motto, "Lifting as we climb." They advocated for women's rights as well as to uplift and improve the African American community. Then we have the Alpha Suffrage Club, which was founded by Ida B. Wells, the first Black women's suffrage club in Chi-Town. Women, Black women, coming together with an agenda to have equal rights, the right to vote, the right to an education, the list goes on. Side note diary, did you know the struggle of the women's suffrage movement was mad real? The founding mothers started with such great intentions as abolitionists and suffragists, but with the passing of the 15th Amendment in 1870, a divide was created. There were some women in leadership who felt the Negro man for sure didn't deserve the right to vote before they did. As a result of this change in agenda, the suffrage movement split into two associations. There was the National Woman Suffrage Association, whose primary focus was getting women the right to vote, and the American Woman Suffrage Association, which stayed committed to women's suffrage and the abolition of slavery. This 21-year split literally delayed the progression of the movement tremendously. And finally, in 1890, when the two joined forces again, they formed the National American Women's Suffrage Association. As the leading organization in the nation with the most members for the women's suffrage movement, they played a pivotal role in the passing of the 19th Amendment. This was such a great thing for every woman, as long as you were not a woman of color. State and local governments did not acknowledge the 15th Amendment, which gave Black men the right to vote, and for sure didn't care about the 19th Amendment, which now included the woman of the house. From the time these laws were adopted, the ancestors were legally denied their right to vote due to the implementation of literacy tests, poll taxes, all of these ridiculous grandfather clauses. And despite the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which ended segregation in public places and banned employment discrimination, we as a people still could not exercise the right to vote. It wasn't until the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which, in case you didn't know, was a direct result of Bloody Sunday, which was the march from Selma to Montgomery on Sunday, March 7th, 1965, where Black men, women, and children marched for 54 miles to the state capitol demanding an end to voter registration discrimination, that we were able to participate in elections at the state and local levels. And they had to send the feds in to escort us to and from the polling locations. It is for these reasons, Sister Diary, that I continue to cast my vote every election since the age of 18. For Lucy Stone and Julia Ward Howe, abolitionists and suffragists who passed before the law that they literally dedicated their lives to was ratified. I cast my vote for Mary Ann Shadd Cary, the first Black suffragist who never saw the day that we as a people could vote. For Sojourner Truth, who was a woman, and for Harriet Tubman, who shared her story to help influence the need for the right to vote. I will continue to cast my vote for my brothers and sisters across this nation today who are plagued by voter suppression and strict voter ID laws in their impoverished communities. And I encourage you, women, men, non-binary, whatever your gender identity is, whatever your sexual orientation, whatever your religion, get up and get out. This is not an option. It is not a privilege. It is a right you should proudly take advantage of. And in the words of the late, great Sojourner Truth, from her Ain't I a Woman speech, obliged to you for hearing me. Now old me ain't got nothing more to say.
Thank you again. That was truly terrific. We will now move on to public comment. The City Council values your comments. However, pursuant to the Brown Act, we cannot take action on items not listed on our agenda. Tonight's public comment period is limited to 20 minutes, with 2 minutes allotted to each speaker. We will begin with Diane Schneider, followed by Tripp Mills and Michael Kelly. Ms. Schneider?
Good evening, City Council. I am Diane Schneider, Food and Nutrition Director for Jewish Family Service. Thank you for supporting staff recommendations to fund the JFS nutrition program with reallocation funds. These funds would be used to purchase the nutrition supplement Ensure for 10 homebound clients. These 10 clients are the most frail, underweight, poor appetite, and or those with weakened immune systems. This will add over 400 calories a day, 18 grams of protein, and the daily vitamins and minerals that they need. The clients still receive, a very balanced meal from us every day, for frozen meals for 7 days with fresh fruits and vegetables, and grains. And as a nutritionist, I know this will make a major difference in their health and well-being. And thank you for considering this most important need for these homebound clients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Schneider. Tripp Mills and Michael Kelly, to be followed by Simon Costello.
Good evening. My name is Tripp Mills, and I am the Associate Director of Housing at Senior Services at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. To my left is Michael Kelly. He's a resident of West Hollywood and our new housing navigator that we just hired to work in the city of West Hollywood. So on behalf of the Los Angeles LGBT Center Senior Services Department, I want to thank the West Hollywood City Council for supporting city staff recommendations to allocate social services contract savings to senior services. The additional funding will go directly to provide meals and housing navigation services to our West Hollywood community members. And just so you know, since we opened the new Anita Mae Rosenstein campus at our Senior Services Center, we've seen a 70% increase in the number of participants coming to our center. And in January, we served 340 meals to West Hollywood community members alone. So that just gives you an idea of the growth. For housing navigation, our new senior housing project is getting ready for the initial application process. In order to ensure we have as many West Hollywood community members applying, we have utilized the additional funding to hire a full-time housing navigator specifically working in West Hollywood, and this is Mr. Kelly right here. Our goal is to have at least 150 West Hollywood community members applying and to lease up a minimum of 13 units with West Hollywood community members. I think it's important to publicly acknowledge and thank the City of West Hollywood for providing the additional funding, which enabled us to close on this project. If it wasn't for you, the housing would not be completed. And I want to thank Councilmember John Duran for leading that. GAP funding allowed us to continue with the project, and we want to ensure that this position will get all 13 units filled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Simon Costello, to be followed by Andrew Reback.
Good evening, council members. I'm Simon Costello, also with the Los Angeles LGBT Center, specifically with Children, Youth and Family Services. I also want to thank council members for supporting staff recommendations to allocate some of those savings to the Youth Services Department. This money is going to be used to open up 2 more beds in our transitional housing program, specifically for West Hollywood members. When we moved into the new campus back in May, we increased our beds from 62 to 84, but we kept over 8 beds unfilled until we identified a specific need and specific funding to go with those 8 beds. So this funding allocation from City West Hollywood is going to open 2 of those beds. In fact, those beds are now open and now occupied, and those young people who are West Hollywood members will also have access to the full range of services that's available in our new youth center and our youth academy. So thank you very much for the support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Costello. Andrew Reback, to be followed by Victor Omachenko.
Good evening, all members of the council, those watching at home, city staff. Glad to speak on item 2M regarding social service spending reprogramming, and I'm very happy the council has this on consent. The city will now consider with this item the reprogramming of $131,720 of social service spending. This is spending our savings back on those who need it most. It is great work by all involved, including our Human Services Commission, our social services staff, all the staff involved, our excellent social service providers and our partners, and of course, our City Council for prioritizing this funding. This spending will address key priorities that the city has for our residents, including aging in place, the HIV Zero initiative, our 5-year plan to address homelessness, and our anti-poverty initiatives. The Human Services Commission is very happy this item is on the consent calendar, and we thank you again for your unanimous consent. Also, lastly, we would like to let you know that we have a draft of a new brochure of all of our Human Services funded social service programs, so please, to our city residents, look out for your new brochure. Please take a read for the first time. It will be available in English, Russian, and in Spanish. So thank you, spasiba, gracias to all. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reback. Victor Omolchenko to be followed by John Sessa.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. My name is Victor Omolchenko, longtime West Hollywood resident. Just commenting on several of the items on the consent calendar. Just for branding purposes and public information purposes, I know you're all busy, we're all busy. When we see items that maybe have just a little bit more of explanatory material, it makes us maybe think more about them and be in favor of them or ask questions of you. So when I see item 2K, notice of completion for the bike signs improvements, just that one little paragraph blurb on 2K would be nice if it just said, and we have a new bike lane, or we painted them green, or the signs say this and that. Furthermore, I really want to thank you for continuing to support co-sponsoring the AIDS Life Cycle 2020. When I get to item 2R, co-sponsorship of a night of healing, it's similar to what I said about the bike signage. It would be good to know what the organization Taking Back Ourselves does, just a brief description within the blurb in the consent calendar to give us a little bit of an idea of what that night of healing will be about. And then you pulled consent item number, you pulled 5B and moved it to consent. And let me say that with the housing crisis that exists now, anything that we can do, anything that you can direct city staff, and I know it's on the consent item, I'm happy that you're looking at the potential for housing for middle income households. That's very, very important. We have our affordable housing, we have our high-end housing, but what about that moderate income middle class housing? So I thank you for looking into that. I was away when our dear Gene Dobrin passed away. In fact, a college buddy of mine, there was a memorial service for him in Palm Springs these last week and a half. So I just want to say that Gene Dobrin was a mentor. I miss her terribly. And I thank her for introducing me to such publications as Using CEQA to Protect Your Community. I know she's looking down on us now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Omolchenko. John Sessa to be followed by Renee Nahum.
Hello, I'm Dr. John Sessa, the Executive Director of the Vanderpump Dog Foundation. On Saturday, May 16th, we'll be hosting our 5th annual World Dog Day. It's a free event to the public that brings awareness to the Uland Dog Meat Festival, as well as issues of animal welfare domestically. We will be, as normal, we will having dogs for adoption from the Vanderpump Dog Foundation, as well as some other organizations like St. Martin and Rock and Roll Rescue. Additionally, in partnership with some of our partners this year, we'll be offering educational workshops throughout the event on topics like animal first aid, dental, and animal hygiene, as well as best practices about dog ownership. We will be having dog adoptions, about 40 vendors. It will be a non-alcoholic event. We will be having entertainment. It is free to the public, and we'll be having a red carpet with press as we do. We hope the city of West Hollywood would consider the sponsorship of the event, and we're grateful for the support the city has given us every year, and I can't believe it's the 5th one, so we're excited for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sessa. Renee Nahum to be followed by Joyce Heftel.
Good evening, Council. I'm one of the partners in the original Cannabis Cafe, and as you may know, you can consume cannabis there and also eat some delicious fresh food. We are rolling out our community discount program, where anybody who lives in West Hollywood, if you're a resident of West Hollywood, and it's either on your ID, or even if you've moved and you have some sort of utility bill that has your address on it, you get a 15% discount on all our food. It's delicious. We have vegan options. We even have keto-friendly food now, which is very delicious. I hope people will come. It's from Monday through Thursday from 10 to 5. Join us for lunch or brunch, and you could consume cannabis or not. And we also have some cards where you can have a discount on pre-rolled cannabis. But I'll hand these out. We're giving these to the local businesses, so if somebody is a patron of a local business in West Hollywood, they can give out these coupons too. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Nahum. Joyce Heftel, to be followed by Shane Nash.
Hi, I haven't seen you since the new year, so belated Happy New Year. I'm talking about in society something small, but it's not small to me. The recycling center at Pavilions. They say they're being forced to close. They're saying it's because only homeless use it. Well, I use it, and I get back about $100 to $150 a year of money I have to pay, and I don't think it's right for me to have to donate an extra $100 or $150 to Athens, or have to pollute to drive further to recycle. The homeless, some of them are getting money and they're eating with the money and they're spending that money in the community, or they're getting medicine. Taking that away for them is going to create more theft and crime because they need to get money somewhere, and for them this is a job. And you're taking away their job. This is the only recycling center left. It's at the Pavilions. It's not causing traffic problems. Grocery stores have a law that they have to take them, but I was in a grocery store. When I walked in, a guy was trying to recycle. 30 minutes later, when I walked out, he was still trying to recycle. It's going to create a bigger problem for the grocery stores and the grocery store staffs having to take the recycling. It's just not a good idea. And while we're talking about Athens, they're a monopoly. They leave everybody's gate open, ours 4 days a week, 6 hours a day, allowing people to come in. When we ask them to close it, they don't, because they don't care. They're a monopoly. And so I really suggest that the next time their contract comes up, you do some open bidding, because they're charging us so much more than they ever have before, because they're a monopoly and they can do whatever they want because the contract's with the city, and you're not keeping their prices down. So please keep the recycling center open, and please do something about Athens. And Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Heftel. Shane Nash, to be followed by Alexis Sanchez.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor. Good to see you all again. I wanted to reintroduce myself tonight as the official Employment Director for the City of West Hollywood for Trans Can Work. I have joined recently as of a month ago, and I wanted to reintroduce myself as well as my partner over here, Lucky Alexander.
How you doing? How you doing? I'm Lucky Alexander. I'm the Employment Director for Trans Can Work as a whole.
I wanted to thank the council tonight very much for the consent on 5A. We appreciate that very much. The trans community has really seen so much with this particular city council. I personally have had a connection with a few of you for the past 10 years, and I just want to say thank you so much for the support for the entire trans community as a whole, and for continuing to make the city of West Hollywood a beacon of hope for trans people. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Alexis Sanchez, to be followed by Michael Mendelson.
Good evening, City Council, Mayor Pro Tem, and Mayor. I'm just here to thank you for item 5A and for moving it to consent. when I have the honor of serving on the Transgender Advisory Board, and when I was first elected, I think I'm coming up on year 3 now. It was February of 2016. You know, I listened to the needs of the community, and transphobia was something that kept coming up time and time again. There were a couple of high-profile incidents of transphobia at some of the clubs and restaurants here in West Hollywood, so I had the idea to do a large-scale campaign, a visibility campaign, to help stem that tide of transphobia in West Hollywood. So I brought it to Mayor D'Amico about a year ago, I think, and we started talking about just some ways that we could help move the needle when it came to trans rights, and just making sure that West Hollywood was inclusive and welcoming for everybody. So I really love what the city continues to do for trans people. I think we're a bastion for trans rights and really set the bar as far as the city and the county goes. I don't know of any other small city that does things like this and continues to fund organizations like Trans Can Work, which just, you know, are committed to getting trans people hired and lowering some of the disparities that trans people face in the community, and just continuing to fund visibility initiatives like this one. So thank you again.
Thank you. Michaela Mendelson, to be followed by Drian Juarez.
Hello, City Council, and thank you so much for your support for the work we're doing and for the trans community. Thank you for whoever just corrected the spelling of my name. I really appreciate that,
Yes,
too.
we're both happy about that. Thank you.
Okay. So I just, you know, I'm the founder of Trans Can Work, but I want to speak just for a minute as an employer and talk about what I like about what we're about to embark on with the city. Culture is really important, and my associate Drian Juarez will probably talk about that. That in hiring is really, you know, we can change policies and supportive policies in corporations throughout the country, but are they really hiring? If they were, the unemployment rate wouldn't still be 3 times as high and 5 or 6 times as high for trans people of color. So when we hired 50 to 60 trans people in my restaurants over a several-year period, with Drian's help, by the way, we had a wonderful experience. I had to tell you, when I first started as an employer, I was a little concerned. I was putting kids through college and saying, you know, I know this is the right thing, I have to do it, but I want to see how this is going to work. And the wonderful thing about it was, with the fellow employees, they all had each other's backs, and it was a wonderful experience there. 2, the customers loved the new relationships they were developing with our transgender employees, and it was opening their hearts and minds. And those relationships between the employees who are maybe working for the first time in their true gender identity, having that support to do that, and together with the customer affirming them every day for who they really were, their lives changed from day-to-day, even moment-to-moment survival, to seeing wonderful things happen in their lives. And that was the impetus that got us to do what we do. And I'll just finish, because my time's up, by saying that by going out and certifying and working with all these companies to be ready culturally to hire and support trans employees and allowing us to connect them with employees, you will truly be making strides forward in changing the culture in the workplace in West Hollywood. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Drian Juarez, to be followed by Jacob Rostovsky.
Good evening, esteemed council members. I know many of you, but my name is Drian Juarez, and I wanted to reintroduce myself to you as the Vice President of Programs at Trans Can Work, where our mission is to create a culture nationally where trans people can thrive in the workplace. I wanted to speak today on the city's anti-transphobia initiative. I am so excited to see this come to fruition. It's been a long journey, and I especially want to send out a shout out to Alexis Sanchez for holding true and fast to her vision of having a truly inclusive city. As a former member of the TAB, it was disheartening to hear from community members who had experienced violence and/or discrimination within the city borders or at city businesses. It highlighted for me the fact that policies are a great start, a wonderful foundation to a truly inclusive culture. We have an opportunity now to create that culture within the city through training, through certification, through a toolkit that we will give out to HR departments, through an e-learning module, and in-person training sessions, and window decals that will certify businesses as inclusive. This is the goal, to uplift everyone. When looking at concepts like diversity and inclusion and visibility, we believe the act is more empowering, more defining, and more sustainable than a job. We believe employment with a great employer leads to employment and visibility, empowerment and inclusion, and sustainability. So thank you so much for prioritizing trans and gender nonconforming people, and thank you for moving this item to consent. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Juarez. Jacob Rostovsky, to be followed by John Erickson.
Hello, everybody. I had to rewrite this because it moved from consent. So, hello, I'm Jake Rostovsky, he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a member of the West Hollywood Trans Advisory Board. This is my first year, so thank you so much. I'm here standing before you to thank you for consent for item 5A. You see, up until recently, as a trans individual who was born and raised in the city of West Hollywood, I never really felt a part of this community. And that was because every time I came out, I was met with transphobic rhetoric about how I did not belong in a gay man's city. This led to feelings of depression, isolation, confusion, and fear. And you see, as people who are part of West Hollywood City Council, we all know that West Hollywood is more than a gay man's city. And unfortunately, a lot of this thought comes from lack of transgender awareness, trans visibility in businesses and occupations, and inclusion. So now that we have this consent to do this amazing trans visibility campaign, trans youth and trans individuals can come here looking for refuge and not be met with rejection from other letters in the LGBT acronym. So I just wanted to say I'm so thankful, and I'm really excited that this campaign's gonna be taken off and that my community is finally going to get the visibility that we need, and West Hollywood's finally going to be moving away from that idea of being a gay man's city. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rostovsky. John Erickson, and our final speaker is Lynn Russell.
Hello, council members. John Erickson, City of West Hollywood. He, him, his pronouns as well. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of your support this weekend. I can thank each and every one of you from coming out to the Vagina Monologues, Mayor Pro Tem Horvath for being in the monologues, and then to Councilmember Heilman, Councilmember Meister, Councilmember Duran, and Mayor D'Amico for coming out and introducing the crowds in either Saturday and Sunday. It was an incredible event. We raised $5,000 for Planned Parenthood, and the word vagina was said a lot right here where I'm standing right now. And then I am going to try and eat dinner tonight instead of staying here all night, but I wanted to speak on 2U, and I know it was pulled, but I'm in full support of this item. When you look at the ways in which Big Tobacco is actually targeting our youth or other individuals with these fancy ads with flavored tobacco, or the ways in which they're actually promoting a very chemically harmful drug that is actually killing people, as someone who suffers from asthma and who has had people that have tried to quit tobacco and try to make it so that way they understand that it is killing people at a rapid rate that is quite alarming, and something that we should all be very worried about. We need to understand that it goes along with what 2U is trying to do. Is our core mission for the city is respect for our citizens, our constituents, and the people that we actually are here to serve. I'm in full support of 2U, and right now we need to really look at the ways in which Big Tobacco is trying to find these caveats and ways in which they can get out of state law and with coupons or anything else, and really target people who are at risk and potentially setting themselves up from very harmful diseases and even death if they start smoking flavored tobacco and tobacco in general. And I urge you to continue supporting 2U tonight because it's very critical. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Ms. Lynn Russell is our final speaker.
Hi, good evening, Lynn Russell. Good evening, Mayor D'Amico and fellow council members. I would like to share that in 1986, the first historic survey for West Hollywood was conducted by Christy Johnson McAvoy and Leslie Human, funded by a grant matched by the city for $20,500. Councilmember John Heilman might remember that. They advocated development of a preservation plan and establishment of a task force and guide for the city. I would like to point out that the accurate historic resources assessments and up-to-date surveys are extremely important in preserving our sense of place in each West Hollywood neighborhood. We can preserve the value and manage new development wisely in accordance with our ordinance that addresses neighborhood compatibility. Tangentially, this refers to another item down the agenda this evening. 10 years ago, I won an appeal partly based on this idea, which enabled a new structure to be inspired by the previous 1908 Spanish colonial revival building that missed being recognized on the survey. 7914 is a brilliant credit to the neighborhood, something that would be welcomed in Santa Barbara even with its strict guidelines. I live in an area with about 40 landmark structures in a 5-block radius, not far from the Spalding Square HPOZ east of Fairfax, which is a gem, although it is in Los Angeles. With a full-time historic preservation position, increased knowledge, and public awareness, our historic resources can flourish and inspire similar, sensitive new development, particularly since many of our potential structures currently function as our affordable housing. I hope you'll give this some thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. And now we will move to council member comments. Who would like to begin? Either John wish to begin?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start. I just want to start with a few thank yous. Let me first start by thanking Cleo Smith and her staff for a wonderful Oscars party night at West Hollywood Park. It's always a big event here in the community, and it always goes off flawlessly. And while I didn't get a chance to attend, I was really happy to see that things went so well. So thank you, Cleo. I don't even know if Cleo's here, but if you see Cleo, tell her I said thank you. I want to thank Alexis Sanchez, she's still here, there you are, for co-moderating the ChemSex Forum with me last week. We had about 75 people here in council chambers having a very frank and candid discussion around ChemSex, and with an excellent panel. The reality is Alexis did all the footwork and all the groundwork in putting it together, and so we're very grateful for the hard work you did, Alexis. Thank you for doing that. And may the discussion continue on crystal meth, fentanyl, and its impact on our community. I wanted to respond briefly to Joyce Heftel. She's still here. I don't see her. I think she left. There's been no change at the recycling center at Pavilion, so I'm not really sure what she's talking about. I can say that Councilmember Meister and I have been working really hard with the Norma Triangle neighborhood to get rid of that recycling center because of its very consequential and adverse impacts on that particular neighborhood and the amount they have to bear with the recycling center. It's the only one on the entire west side of Los Angeles, and it's really having a lot of adverse impacts on the Norma Triangle neighborhood. So while I can appreciate the comments that Joyce Heftel made, that sort of center belongs in an industrial area, industrial park, and not right next door to a neighborhood. But, you know, at this point, nothing's changed that we're aware of, so I just wanted to respond quickly to Joyce. This Friday, the 21st, I guess it was about 5 or 6 years ago, I initiated a council item to create a lesbian speaker series here in the city. It was a way for gay men to begin the gratitude and the thank yous back to the lesbian community for being so supportive through the HIV and AIDS epidemic. When my brothers and I were so sick, lesbians really stepped up into places of leadership and led the battle on HIV and AIDS at a time when we were really disheartened. And so with the June Mazer Archives getting a permanent home at the Worley Building, one of the other things that we created was this lesbian speaker series. This Friday, it's going to be Tig Notaro, who is having a conversation with Beth Lapides. It should be a great night. Tig's a very funny comedian, and it's sold out. So if you didn't get tickets, sorry, it's sold out. But I just wanted to take a moment to, again, take a thank you to the lesbians in our city and our community for everything they've done for us. And then finally, just a quick comment on item 5B. It's on consent. This is about creation of middle-class housing. I mean, I generally support the idea. I think, to me, those are called condominiums already. We do have low-income, affordable housing units in all of our new development projects. And of course, we have very high-end single-family homes on the other end that are multi-million dollars. And to me, the middle-class housing has always been the rent-controlled apartments and the condos. We don't have any condo conversions happening in the city of West Hollywood. Nobody's apartment buildings are being seized and forced into condo conversion. But if we want to study it and come back with recommendations on how to create more housing, I'm all for that. I've always been for that. I think really what we've been trying to have a continuing conversation up here is about working class housing. And working class on the west side of Los Angeles, like San Francisco or Seattle or Honolulu or New York, is six-figure salaried, sadly, incomes. But that is.
For the city manager in your report in item 4A, if you could speak a little bit to the plan for recommendations in the report that have not come forward from staff tonight. There are some things that were recommended, but other things that weren't. And then on item 4B, there are some programs that have been approved by council and budgeted, but aren't moving forward. And so if you have suggestions on how we make sure what's budgeted actually moves forward, if you could speak to those two things in your comments, that would be helpful. Since the last council meeting, I represented the city at the National League of Cities and Tech for America Policy Roundtable in San Francisco. The National League of Cities constituency group presidents convening the National League of Cities Human Development Committee meeting, the Liability Trust Fund and Oversight Claims Board meeting, the Sanitation District meeting. And I want to say the senior Valentine's Day dance was a riot once again this year. Thank you to staff who always program it, and for everyone in the community who came out and participated. It's so much fun. It's always a great event. If you haven't been, what are you doing? You got to go. It's the most fun you're going to have on Valentine's Day, assured. And finally, on February 7th, which has happened since our last meeting. February 7th was National Wear Red Day. While it focuses on the little pins that we often wear, our red dresses focusing on women's heart health, we know that heart disease is the #1 leading cause of death in the United States for all people. And so we want to take a moment to raise awareness about heart health and make sure that we're all getting our regular checkups and taking care to take care of our hearts and our health. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary. I'm sorry, I just had one more comment. At the COG meeting, at the presentation on the Metro Next Gen buses, they talked about possibly changing some of the bus shelters and how the bus shelters looked. And we brought, Councilmember Hammond and I brought up the public safety issues with the bus shelters, and some other people did as well. And I know that there's been some issues at Santa Monica Boulevard and La Brea on the north side, that bus shelter. So I wonder if this would be an opportunity for us to have a discussion with Metro about that shelter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have no comments this evening. The city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm going to speak real slow because I'm trying to get an answer from staff on one of the questions that came up. A couple of announcements. Both of them are related to the Urban Design and Architectural Studio. On Thursday, February 20th and Wednesday, March 25th, we're going to be having a Hart Park Improvement Community Presentation. These are open to the public. Both of them are at Plummer Park from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock, and it's an opportunity for the public to come out and learn what improvements we plan to make to that wonderful facility. Also, just a quick announcement, we were just awarded the Prop 2 grant. The city was awarded $160,000, and we're using that to develop our multifamily design standards, and hopefully that can be incorporated into the conversation about housing, which the council approved tonight. For the staffing analysis and the study, I'll address those specific questions during that presentation. In regards to the actual budget, the items that have been approved in the budget, while there may have been delays in implementing some of the programs, it's our intent to move forward with the entire work program. So are there specific items, we could talk about them tonight, or we could just meet on them later, but with some of the staffing challenges and larger scale projects, there may have been some delays, but the work program is still intact and we're moving forward with all of it. Thank you.
That's it. Okay. That ends the city manager's report. May I have the fiscal impact on the consent calendar?
Tonight's fiscal impact with the addition of items 4B, 5A, 5B, and 6A, which is an ordinance. Sorry about that. An ordinance of the City of West Hollywood amending the regulations governing contributions to municipal election campaigns for city council offices and amending the West Hollywood Municipal Code. It will be introduced on first reading tonight. And we also removed items 2N and 2U. So it would be $115,760 in expenditures, $3,114 in potential revenue, and $7,891 in waived fees.
Does that include the moving the budget to the consent
That does not include the budget items. There were various nuances to the budget, so that is a separate item, a separate fiscal impact.
Okay.
Okay.
But didn't we move that to consent calendar? I just want to make sure we're doing that we're saying all we need to say before we take a vote. So you tell me and I will follow you.
Right.
Yeah, I would just say for now, the numbers that she reiterated were for the standalone consent calendar item, with the exception of any items being pulled. In addition to that, the mid-year budget will be added on to that as a separate item.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have a motion by Councilmember Heilman, seconded by me. All those who wish to mark a vote, please do. It passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Our consent calendar has passed. We will now begin with public hearing 3A. The public hearing is now open. This is an appeal of the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendation that the City Council approve the cultural resource designation of the front duplex on the property located at 1251 Detroit Street. Looks like Jennifer Alkire will be speaking.
Extremely briefly, I just wanted to introduce my colleague, Gurdeep Kaur. This is her first presentation before the council. So is my microphone not working? Is that better? Okay, there we go. Wanted to introduce my colleague, Assistant Planner Gurdeep Kaur. She is the lead planner on this item, and she'll be giving this presentation.
Welcome. Please.
Good evening, Mayor D'Amico and council members. My name is Gurdeep Kaur. I am an assistant planner with the City of West Hollywood. The item before you this evening is an appeal regarding the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendation to designate the front Craftsman duplex located on the property at 1251 Detroit Street as a local cultural resource. In the spring of 2017, a prospective buyer supplied the city with a historic resource assessment identifying the property as eligible for cultural resource designation. The buyer did not proceed with the purchase. In November 2017, the new property owner submitted a development permit application to demolish all structures on the site and redevelop it with a 3-story, 5-unit apartment building. This application included a historic resource assessment that deemed that the property was not of historic significance, in contradiction with the HRA on file with the city. In order to receive a final determination from the city regarding the historic resource status of the property, the current property owner nominated it for cultural resource designation. This was intended to clarify its status. The owner does not support the designation. The Historic Preservation Commission heard the item on October 28, 2019, found that the property was eligible for designation, and voted in support of staff's recommendation to council that the property be designated as a local cultural resource. On November 5th, a timely appeal was filed by the property owner. The appellant opposes the designation, citing technical errors, unsupported findings, lack of evidence, and questions the city's HRA peer review process. Staff reviewed the appeal and responded to each point in the staff report. After reviewing the entire record, staff finds that the appellant did not refute any of the original findings through new evidence or documentation of errors, or identified unsupported findings substantiating the basis for the appeal, as required in the West Hollywood Municipal Code. One of the arguments in the appeal is the potential for conflict of interest in the city's review of the historic resource assessments. The first report that the city received was prepared by a qualified consultant named Leslie Human. Ms. Human has done prolific work in the field throughout Southern California, including on-call contract work with Chattel Inc., whom the city also retains for ongoing historic preservation consulting. While she has never been an employee of Chattel Inc., she has done work on their behalf on and off for the past 5 years. In keeping with standard practice, we requested that Chattel peer review the 3 HRAs. Upon review in August 2018, Chattel gave its opinion that the other 2 HRAs did not provide sufficient evidence, and that Human report provided the most complete analysis of the designation criteria. The property owner then brought to staff's attention that there was a potential conflict of interest between Leslie Human and Chattel Inc., given the ongoing nature of their professional relationship. Recognizing this, staff reviewed each of the 3 HRAs independently and weighed each one on its own merits. The finding was made that the Human report provided the most evidence to support its conclusions. Based on this review, staff made the recommendation, and HPC concurred that designation is appropriate, but voiced its concerns regarding the peer review process. Therefore, staff recommends that the City Council deny the appeal and affirm the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendation. Regardless of a perceived conflict in the peer review process, evidence has been presented that supports the inclusion of the property on the local register, and therefore staff recommends that City Council designate the property as a local cultural resource. Please also note that the resolution has been updated to include the statute of limitations disclaimer at the end. This is standard language the city includes in its resolutions that was missing here. I'm available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for the staff at this time? I just have one. So if we were to deny the appeal and find that this this property is historic, the duplex at the front of the property is historic, if a future development plan would come forward from the property owner, can they revisit this and revisit the items that are found to be defining or contributing features, and ask us and the Planning Commission to look again at whether this is in its entirety a local cultural resource?
So if the property is designated tonight, it will be a local cultural resource, and there are specific, and I assume that you're saying if a developer wanted to come and ultimately demolish the site.
Or just somehow modify the front duplex, but not demolish the site, but maybe they only believe 5 of the 8 defining features are actually defining or extant, and they would say, I want to keep these 5 and make this development. Do they have the option to do that?
Yes. So it would be a local cultural resource, and it would be designated. So any changes to the property would need a certificate of appropriateness. And any alterations to the property would also be reviewed under CEQA. And so we would have to make the finding that there is no substantial adverse change to the resource, meaning that they're altering parts of the building that are considered not character defining or don't impact the resource. Or the council would have to adopt a statement of overriding consideration if we wanted to go beyond that and it became a substantial adverse change.
So if we do find that this is a local cultural resource, this is not the end of the story. there could perhaps be additional chapters in the history of this building.
There are a lot of things that can happen on a property with a cultural resource on it. There can be additional development on portions of the property that don't have the cultural resource. And we've in this room talked about several projects that have considerable changes, but still maintain the crux of what makes it a historic resource.
Great. All right. No other comments? Then Mr. Eber is the appellant's rep, and we're going to, according to the city clerk, we're going to give you 5 minutes because you're, in this case, representing both sides of this question. So we're going to let you talk about whichever side you wish, and then after all the public comment, you'll have another couple of minutes.
Mayor, do you want disclosures now about communications, ex parte communications?
Sure, if you'd like.
All right, I've spoke to Mr. Yaber earlier today and also was communicated by the West Hollywood Historic Preservation Group.
I haven't talked to anybody.
I haven't talked to anyone, but I've seen the site.
I spoke with the representative who's before us tonight, as well as my Historic Preservation Commissioner about their discussion.
All right, please proceed.
Good evening, Mark Eber, City of El Segundo. It's nice to be back here, Honorable Mayor and council members. I'm actually going to share the presentation with Pam O'Connor. She is the author of one of the reports. I believe it's report number 3. But before I did so, I just wanted to clarify that the issue of process was not raised by us. It was raised by a commissioner. We only addressed it. We raised it privately with staff. We did not go into the commission with the intention of using that as the crux of our not supporting the designation, but it did come up, and then therefore we addressed it. So with that, I'm going to introduce Pam O'Connor, who will take you through some of the evidence regarding the historic nature of the property.
So, we have my PowerPoint? No. No. Okay, so, any way to cue it up, or? Hi, guys. Okay, so first of all, I actually did this PowerPoint by myself, meaning I did all the slides, so I do want to get some credit for that. We thought we had more time, so I will whip through it quickly, because some things were covered. So, moving it forward. Now I just...
I think you have to turn the wand on the side.
Yeah, no, I'm pointing it up. It's...
Can we start the clock over?
Okay, there was an on switch. All right, thank you all with the basics. So just to quickly go over some quick visual images of other Craftsman buildings that have been designated. There also was a survey done in 2009 by the city that identified Craftsman-style architecture in that in the zones, the multifamily zones, and the subject property was not identified. And just moving forward here through some of those that were. The survey also provided a matrix, and the matrix identified the buildings on the 1200 block of Detroit, and it did not identify any of the buildings as historic, including the findings that this current building was not identified as eligible in that survey. We'll provide a little context to you about the neighborhood, because there's no historic district there. Building cannot be seen as a contributor to a historic district. It's across the street from, it's a block away from La Brea, west of La Brea, and it is right across the street from a large supermarket development, and this just provides you with context. The red bubble shows you where the subject property is. This shows you the neighborhood, the context of the neighborhood, a little bit more about the context of the neighborhood and where the building is. And again, the subject building is the one on the far left side of the image here. So this is a neighborhood that does not have any potential for a historic district. So we're zeroing down to the specific building itself. There's been some discussion about it being a cultural resource. None of the reports find any association with historic events or historic people. So really what we're zeroing in on is this architecture and the quality of the architecture of this particular building. So the building, when we look at it against some of the criteria, of eligibility criteria, we see that there are, that is not an excellent example of the style. There have been modifications to the building that predate this ownership that included the rafter tails at some point in time had been clipped off and cut off. The workmanship and quality of the workmanship is moderate, it's modest, it's not an exceptional design. High quality Craftsman architecture will also respond to the site. This is basically on a typical site. There's no unique response to the site. No natural materials were used in it. There's no stone, there's no arroyo stone, there's basically, again, typical wood, and this other image is of the porch area. I want to focus on a little bit more about the building, that the railing is not original, the piers have been restuccoed over and they're misaligned. So when we're looking at this and we're thinking about, is this the quality level of being an architectural specimen that should be retained for its architecture? Again, no cultural association with the people or events there. So what we posit is that the building doesn't represent an early or a rare example of the style. In the matrix, by the way, in the data that was collected by the city in all of its surveys, there's no information that's presented about whether a building is a single-family residence, a duplex, or a courtyard type apartment. That type of data has not been collected. So it's really, there's no evidence to say because it's a duplex that it stands out or it's rare, because there's nothing to prove that. The building is located in the very far eastern portion of the city, and its provenance and its development history is more tied to that of Hollywood. It's not related to Sherman, and it's not associated with that western portion of the city. So yes, it's within the city of West Hollywood. It is 1 block away from La Brea and the eastern border, which is why its development history ties into that of Hollywood and that area. So we think that the findings have been made by, and pretty much it is a disagreement among experts. If you look at it, you see that the first survey did not find it as eligible, did not list it. You have one report that says they thought it was eligible, and then you have 2 other reports that say it's not eligible. So I think right there it points out it's a very modest building. Sometimes it's in the eye of the beholder, but we think that if the government is going to be designating a building as historic, that it needs to be able to make the findings need to be strong, and we don't think that those findings can be made. So thank you.
Did you finish? I mean, we can make sure you've had a chance.
I think I covered everything.
All right, terrific. Mr. Eber, did you have anything else?
Yeah,
Okay.
we thought we had a little bit more, but that's...
Wait, I'm sorry?
Oh, up until right before the hearing, we thought there was like 10 minutes total, and then we found out it's less.
Okay.
So I did my quick abbreviated version, but I think I hit
Okay.
all the points.
I think we got it all, and Mark has nothing else, so I think we'll hear from the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Lynn Russell, to be followed by Victor Omelchenko.
Thank you. Good evening again. The thorough and impressive HRA submitted by Leslie Human, who I referred to earlier as having partnered in the original survey in 1986, had a distinct ring of authenticity in its articulation of all the merits, giving the property a recommendation for historic resource status in West Hollywood. The considerably lesser HRA of Anne Marie Brooks and unnecessarily minimizes its elements. Further, the HRA submitted by Ms. O'Connor from Kaplan Chen Kaplan, format updated, I referred to some dates in my original letter, denigrates the property with phraseology typical of many of its customary HRA reports, written in favor of development projects, but I have never seen one in favor of a designation. It lacks specificity, demonstrates an approach to undercut the integrity, context, significance of a type, and remaining example of the Craftsman duplex in West Hollywood, particularly on the east side. The peer review executed by Chattel is in near perfect alignment with that of the Human HRA, using different but very specific language. The original report by Human executed for a potential buyer had no realistic element of bias and was subsequently underscored by Chattel. A conflict of interest claim suggested by the applicant at the historic preservation meeting that led to unfounded speculation regarding previous professional contract issues and whatever between human and chattel lacked credibility. The errant suggestion drew discussion between commissioners and took away from the main point, that being the Craftsman duplex. On the other hand, the applicant had unfortunately rarely championed the spirit of historic preservation despite positions on the HPC and Planning Commission. Public statements that West Hollywood should not become a historic petting zoo were offensive then, as they have been recent efforts to give short shrift to potential historic elements in development projects within the city under his guidance, when conversely, they could have been uniquely integrated into the projects. I strongly urge the City Council to deny this appeal.
Thank
for
you,
your
Ms. Russell.
consideration.
Thank you very much. Victor Omelchenko to be followed by Stephanie Harker.
Good evening again. Victor Omelchenko speaking on behalf of the West Hollywood Preservation Alliance, urging you to deny the appeal and to designate this 106-year-old Craftsman duplex on Detroit Street on the city's east side as a local cultural resource. The WHPA has reviewed the 3 different historic resource assessments, as well as the August 30th, 2018 peer review memorandum from Chattel. We feel the Chattel review ultimately supports the thorough April 27 HRA by Leslie Heumann, and it attests to discrepancies and oversights in the succeeding Brooks HRA and the Kaplan-Chen Kaplan HRA, and you heard from Ms. Pam O'Connor. She was affiliated with that Kaplan-Chen Kaplan Historic Resource Assessment. Just reacting to some of what's being discussed, we are not asking you, we're not talking about a historic district here. Mention is made, oh, it's not part of a historic district. No, we're talking about designation of an individual local cultural resource. And I think that it's okay to be a moderate or modest building, an example of Craftsman architecture, the kind that was built in the early 20th century on the city's east side. And you know, just because something is not part of the Sherman area does not mean that it is not valuable or important in the entire city of West Hollywood now. So I know that there was a previous effort to establish a thematic district of 30 early 20th century homes in the area of Curzon, Lexington, and Norton. That did not happen, but by denying the current appeal and by designating this rare Craftsman duplex, the City Council, you can reconfirm your commitment to historic preservation on the city's east side. We are not all Sherman. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Omelchenko. Stephanie Harker to be followed by Kathy Blavis.
Good evening, Stephanie Harker, City of West Hollywood. Footnote and my nod to Jean Dobrin, the closed captioning has not been on all night, thereby having difficulty hearing all of you. Regarding this item tonight, I just wanted to reiterate what we have in our municipal code, and I hope that you will uphold this. The provisions of this chapter, which constitute the city's cultural heritage preservation ordinance, are adopted based on the following findings by the council. A, threatened structures and sites. The council has determined that the character, history, and spirit of the city, state, and nation are reflected in the historic structures, improvements, natural features, objects, sites, areas of significance located within the city, and that in the face of ever-increasing pressures of modernization and urbanization, cultural resources, cultural resource sites, and historic districts located within the city are threatened with alteration, demolition, and removal. The council has further determined that these threatened structures, representing the city's unique cultural, historical, and social foundations, should be preserved as a living part of the community life and development in order to build a greater understanding of the city's past and to give future generations the opportunity to appreciate, enjoy, and understand the city's rich heritage. Yes, this is not a district. We who have lived on the east side for over 30 years wish it was a district, but we are required to designate these structures one at a time. This one has been reviewed, found by Mr. Chattel and by the Historic Preservation Commission. to be historic and to be an important part of our past. And I do hope that you will support the staff's recommendation and save this unique building. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Harker, Kathy Blavis, and then we'll be followed by our citizen position slips and Mr. Eber.
Good evening, Kathy Blavis, City of West Hollywood. I will be very succinct in saying I think that the Historic Preservation Commission and staff got this one right. I agree with everything that was said prior to my standing up here, and I think we owe it to what's remaining on the east side to designate those properties that have enough integrity and prove to be valuable in terms of our history. So I'm hoping you'll deny the appeal and support the staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Yes, the following people did not wish to speak but wanted to express their support for staff's recommendation to deny the appeal. Stephen Andrews, West Hollywood. Cynthia Blatt, West Hollywood. Charlotte Johnson, West Hollywood. James Knoll, West Hollywood. Colin Spittler, West Hollywood. Stephanie Visser, West Hollywood. Kimberly Copeland, West Hollywood. Steve Martin, West Hollywood.
Thank you very much. Mr. Eber.
Thank you again, Mark Eber, El Segundo. Can you, I have the second presentation real quick. So I wanted to focus on the bungalow itself. In the staff report, it talks about it's a rare and remaining type in the building, in the city. And real quick, in the context, my question is, how does this particular building further that narrative of the development pattern in the city? And the second part, which I probably won't have to, is process, but I'm certainly here to answer any questions. So real quick, I went through, just to give you a global understanding, there are at least 50 to 75 bungalow type buildings in the city that are either designated or on the potential list or are off the radar that could potentially be investigated. So this is not a rare type, and that is a lot. And as someone mentioned earlier, there was some efforts to preserve some of those buildings on the east side, and there's quite a few, especially along Lexington and Hampton. So these are designated, these are potential, and these are the others. These are along Lexington and Hampton. What's interesting about Lexington and Hampton is there is an opportunity to build a district. There's about a dozen along Lexington, and the examples are in far better condition, far more articulated as examples of Craftsman bungalow. On Hampton, there's 6 that are in a row that could be looked at. On Vista, you have 6 in a row. So this isn't a rare occurrence in the city. It doesn't further that narration. And so our contention is that if you looked at this in a vacuum, in isolation, sure, it has some interesting, but if you look at it in its totality to all the specimens that are in the city, it doesn't rise to the level of those that have been designated or those that are potentially could be designated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone wish to begin? Any questions for staff? Lauren?
Yes, so regarding any of the modifications or repairs, would you say that they're major or are they reversible?
The alterations to the duplex are in the form of general maintenance. The most significant would be the re-roof, which is which a building of this size needs after so long, but everything else from our site visit appears to be correctable.
For example, the grills that were mentioned, that can be removed. I had grills as well. I removed them when I bought my house. Ms. O'Connor said that that really there's no history here on the east side. Yet wasn't Charlie Chaplin Studios and Mary Pickford the lot on the east side
And would you consider that important to West Hollywood's history?
Of course.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a historic district to be, a structure doesn't have to be in a historic district to be designated historic, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and in the report, Ms. O'Connor's report, they referenced the buildings, but we're not talking about the buildings, right? We're talking about one building, the Craftsman in front, not the building in the rear that is not considered a historic.
Right.
Right, so it's not the buildings, it's the building.
Yes.
Okay,
Just
and when she spoke about the Craftsman duplex, we're not talking about the fact that it's a duplex as much as that it is a Craftsman, is that correct? Or is it the combination of both, or?
It's the fact that it's a Craftsman bungalow first and foremost, and in addition, it happens to also be a duplex.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
I have a question about, that was raised from a commissioner about the peer review analysis and whether that could be questioned given the possible conflict of interest. I think that if what we're making this decision on tonight is the evidence that presented, the evidence of the original report still stands, but now there's sort of this asterisk on the peer review that was done, and I'm concerned about that. And I'm wondering whether it would be appropriate for us to send this back to Historic to have it peer reviewed before we made a final determination to solidify the record.
Peer reviewed by another consultant or by the Historic Preservation Commission?
By a consultant that doesn't have the potential conflict.
Well, I believe that staff offered that option for the applicant, and they denied doing a fourth report. And staff can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that when the item went to the HPC did not consider the peer review. Staff took it out of their evidence and just presented the 3 reports and then a recommendation, an independent recommendation from staff, and didn't consider the peer review at that moment. And then the HPC concurred with staff's recommendation that it is historic. So it wasn't part of what the HPC
So
weighed.
legally, we're on solid ground with having the staff report replace a peer review report?
Well, you have planners who are experts in the local context. You have the Historic Preservation Commission, who are also experts in looking at your local context, and now you're looking at it for a third time. So what matters tonight for your decision is that it's based on substantial evidence, and it's up to you as a decision maker to determine if there's enough evidence to meet the findings for designation listed in the resolution. And the 2 findings that are being recommended are exemplified special elements of the city, an example of distinguishing characteristics. Those are the 2 that staff and the HPC find are present here, and so we're asking you to weigh that same evidence. You don't have to consider the peer review. You consider the 3 reports, staff's recommendation, and a Historic Preservation Commission to make your decision.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to start by thanking the appellant and the West Hollywood Preservation Alliance for coming out tonight. And I spoke to each side before the hearing, and I took a look at the Historic Preservation Commission's minutes and noticed that the commission was split 4-1 to 2. There were 4 in favor of designation, 1 opposed, and then there were 2 that were absent. This is an appeal, so in order to overturn the designation of the Historic Preservation Commission, I'd have to find either new evidence presented tonight, or that their findings were not supported, or that there was some error that was committed by the commission. I think that it's best to defer to our commission and our staff on this particular item, given their expertise. I would note also that my commissioner, my appointee on this commission, is an architect, and he was in the majority that voted for designation. I while I respect the opinions of both Ms. O'Connor and Mr. Yabert, and I'm just going to have to respectfully disagree with them this evening. And I would vote this evening to deny the appeal. On a personal anecdote, which I hate to do only as a matter of last resort, I lived in a Craftsman in Santa Ana before I moved to West Hollywood. Part of the joy of living in a Craftsman is restoring it to its previous luster. And it seems to me that some of the changes that were made could be easily remedied, and that the property could be restored by somebody who wanted to actually take the time to restore the Craftsman. Finally, I'll just say, I tried to get a Craftsman district designated at one point, and only got one vote, my own. And I still wish that our council would take the issue up and designate a Craftsman historic district and save all of these homes, so we don't have to do this piecemeal one by one by one. So with that, I would vote to deny the appeal for the reasons stated. Thank you.
Go ahead, you're next. Sure. So I just wanted to say that, and this is sort of a question to you. So I heard the two reasons for finding it, and I guess there's a third idea in my mind, which is that an empty lot is not as good as a house that needs some attention, and but a development on that lot that takes cues from the house that needs some attention is better, in my mind, than an empty lot, and better than a house that needs some attention. So I also am going to vote to deny the appeal, but I want to make sure that the answer, and I don't doubt the staff was correct, but the answer that the staff gave was that should the applicant, and then by extension the owner, wish to develop that property, the question of the local historic resource can be reopened, and they can make a development that addresses what we're doing this evening, and potentially modify it or accept it 100% and work around it. But I'm trying to balance my desire to continue to advocate on behalf of a larger set of ideas around the east side of West Hollywood, and this small yet consequential decision we're making.
So the question won't be reopened because it will be a designated resource, but it will be subject to any development on the site will be subject to a certificate of appropriateness and SEQA review to make sure that whatever is proposed on the site doesn't impact the character-defining features. So there's still possibilities of what can be done on other areas or around the cultural resource, maybe add on to it. We've seen some examples of that. So it won't reopen the question, but it will just make sure that whatever they do doesn't.
But if those character-defining features are impacted, the city council could find a statement of overriding considerations, something that might be like, yes, we could remove 11 rafters and make 6 units of housing, or we can keep 11 rafters, which are the character-defining features, and make 2 units of housing. We might rather have 6 and lose 11 rafters, but still that there is the bones of and the idea of this historic structure.
I think it's always a question of degree, what could be done on the site and still maintain the historic significance which you're trying to protect tonight. That will be the question you're answering. There's different avenues through CEQA and through the Certificate of Appropriateness process that will look at that, but it will be a question of degree. And I don't know if Jennifer has anything else you wanted to answer? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. First, I want to say that I believe that Human's assessment was complete and comprehensive. The modifications, as you answered, or staff answered, are reversible. We're looking at the building in the front, not the building behind the Craftsman. So maybe if they want to redevelop that building, there you go. There's something they can do with that. What really was important as well is the fact that Human's initial report was written for Town Capital Ventures, which I assume was a developer. And so this assessment, if anything, would want to be, no, it's not historic. We want to buy this property and we want to redevelop it. So, this was a very comprehensive assessment. This Town Capital Ventures obviously did not purchase the property because perhaps they wanted to develop it and they didn't want a historic property. So to me, that to me says that this was an objective review of that property, and I would vote to deny the appeal.
Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everyone who spoke tonight. I have a different view, and I think it has to do with the burden that we have as a city to establish by substantial evidence that this property satisfies the requirements of our historic preservation ordinance. And I'm having difficulty making the findings that we have to make. My colleague, Councilmember Duran, pointed out that this is on appeal, but ultimately, the decision we're making today is the decision that will potentially result in litigation, and we have to be able to show on the record that this property meets the standard for historic preservation. Everyone agrees that the back of the site is not at all historic. We're only talking about the front of the site. And I read all of the reports as well, and what we have is the following. This wasn't on the original survey for historic resources, a survey that I believe Human was involved with. The first report does find that it meets the standard. Then we have two more reports by certified historic preservation analysts, and both of those conclude that it doesn't meet the standard because of significant alterations and significant damage to the property. The condition of the property is not ideal, and I think that's what the mayor was referring to. It certainly needs a substantial amount of work to bring it into what we would think is a satisfactory condition. With all of those problems in terms of the record, I know that Lauren has pointed out, Lauren Langer, our city attorney tonight, has pointed out that we also have staff's conclusion, but I think staff's conclusion is influenced in somewhat by the peer review that there've been some questions about it. Maybe the peer review has not been made part of the record or the basis for the commission's decision, but it has been circulated to the whole council. The staff has read it. Undoubtedly, it influenced their conclusion that this was historic based on that peer review. So I have some concerns about the independence of that peer review. I think ultimately, when I'm weighing this, where it is really a marginal case of meeting the standard of the ordinance, and when I weigh that against the need for additional housing in residential areas, I'm going to fall on the side of additional housing. There are other examples of Craftsman buildings that are far more worthy of preservation than this one, where it's marginal, where the back half of the lot everyone agrees isn't historic. I don't think that we should be making the finding. I don't think we can. I am at least optimistic because I think the mayor is essentially inviting the property owner to propose a development that would result in perhaps the replacement of that front building with some of those character-defining features incorporated into a new development. We do have an example of that with the Palm View project on Palm, where the front building that was historic was not demolished, it was taken apart and reconstructed with other buildings built on the property. So a full development occurred, and the historic defining features were reincorporated into a new design. And I don't know if that's what the mayor was suggesting, but it looks like this is going to get designated tonight. I'm certainly open to that in the future.
Thank you. I didn't see. Please.
Sure. Thank you. So I think I agree in part on both sides. I obviously have expressed concern about the influence of the peer review, whether that will be questioned as this item goes potentially into litigation. But I do think that if the threshold for evaluating what's before us tonight is whether there is new evidence that wasn't considered by Historic Preservation Commission, I think what has been presented tonight is in fact what they considered, and that is what they based their recommendation upon. I think I also see that there are 3 votes to move this forward. We've noted the concern about the peer review analysis, but I also think we've made a path forward for a potential new development that does give us more housing while also protecting what is significant to the community about the cultural aspect of this building. So I think that's the path forward tonight.
Member Duran, did you wish to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to move that we close the public hearing and move that we deny the appeal and affirm the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendation.
So moved. We'll mark our votes. And the item passes 4-1. Thank you all very much for coming. We will now move on to item 4A. No, I think it wasn't at the end of the day.
No, it wasn't.
Right.
Great, so item 4A is the staffing analysis that was done by Citygate. We're presenting tonight the first, or at least the entire report, and as part of that submission, we did an initial first phase implementation of the plan that was included in the mid-year budget. There are a number of other personnel, organizational, and policy and procedure recommendations that were also included in the report. And we plan to bring a number of those back as part of the budget discussion and as part of the work program for next year. If there's specific questions, sure.
Well, first of all, on the implementation, page 8 of 22, I just wondered, there's the second bullet from the end, from the bottom, is that a typo? It says review and analyze moving the arts division to communications. Isn't that supposed to be facilities?
We're based on some of the discussions that we've had both internally and also with some of the policymakers. It seems as though the arts division is something that should be a high-profile division for the city, so we're going to be looking at other potential realignments. Nothing's been decided yet.
So it's not a typo, though, because I know that in his report, it was facilities.
Correct, and in the consultant's report, they did make a number of recommendations, of which some of them to us were really low-hanging fruit and that we should move forward with immediately, and some of them from a management perspective we may not have agreed with, and also I think from a policy discussion that we'll be having with the council at a later date, we'll have different discussions on those.
Okay, and I'm just going to give my opinion on a few of the points. One is that I feel that Neighborhood Watch should stay with our Community and Legislative Affairs Division. The Dog Walker Watch program should be sent to the Public Safety Commission. That moving Public Safety Commission to Community Affairs also should not happen. It should stay with Public Safety Division. but I think that moving the Russian Advisory Board and Transgender Advisory Board to Social Services Division would probably be the best solution to get that out of public safety. And then I just had a question. One of the recommendations that I think you're approving is increasing the city manager's purchasing authority to $75,000. What is it at now?
That is not part of the recommendations that are being approved tonight. Those are recommendations that are in the report from the consultant, but we still have to do enabling work to move those forward, so that'll be discussed at a separate time. The purchasing authority right now for the city manager is $25,000. As part of the budget, we would come forward with a resolution to change that at a later time, and I'm looking at David.
Just before you go on, so the recommendations for tonight are on page 1 of 3 of the front, and they're only those? This is a question for Paul, not a statement to you.
Thank you.
I mean, I read them several times, and I also had, sort of lots of information in my head from having read the report, but then reminded myself. So
for tonight, it's only those items that we're making specific recommendations on tonight. I'm going to round up. I believe that there were 70 specific recommendations from the consultant, of which some of those recommendations had a number of layers to it. But tonight, we're only taking an immediate step forward. David?
Yeah, so there were a total of 68 recommendations. There are 8 that are being recommended tonight, and most of those are position related. I guess all of those are position related. There's another 19 that we recommend that we study over the next 1 to 3 months and bring back with the next 2-year budget for the 2020-2021 budget. And then there are another 13 that we recommend that needs more study and we'll be studying over the next year. And then there's the 25 that are just policy or procedure type recommendations that are more internal that we'll implement, but there won't be items coming back to council.
And you're using recommendations, but you're not recommending we pass that tonight. What
Correct.
you want us to pass tonight is 6 changes in staffing, and the 7th, or whatever, is the receive and file of the report itself.
Correct.
Okay.
I was saying recommendations as in recommendations from Citygate, not from staff for tonight.
So I guess my question is, Appendix B, Attachment B, City of West Hollywood Implementation Plan for the Citygate Staffing Analysis and Optimization Plan. Who wrote that? And was that staff?
That is from staff,
Okay.
and that's documents in the city proposed implementation separates those recommendations out in a number of months.
Okay, thank you.
And just for the question regarding the city manager's purchasing authority, it is currently $25,000. It would require a municipal code change, so that's something that we bring back separate from the budget to implement starting July 1, 2021, if the council wishes to do that. It has been $25,000 since 1992, I believe.
Would you do me a favor then, when you bring that back, could you please tell us what other cities do, like Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, Culver City?
We will, and there is,
Okay.
that information is also in the Citygate report as well, but we will bring that back in our staff report.
Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, David. I just wanted to thank both Paul and David and the city team for bringing this forward, just so the public understands what has happened here, or what is happening. We brought in an outside consultant to evaluate all the work that is done at City Hall to try to figure out what was the best way to serve the public and how to make our organization the most effective it could be. And the consultant gave us lots of different recommendations, some of them having to do with staffing, some of them having to do with where different functions should be within the organization. A lot of those changes over time have been made, or we've made changes over time to our structure, and I think this gave us the opportunity to have somebody from outside come in and really look at the work that we do and how to deliver that work in the most effective way to the public. There was a survey conducted of all of the employees. 60% of the employees participated, documenting the work they do and the interconnection between different divisions and departments. The recommendations that you're bringing forth tonight have to do with various reclassifications of positions, relocations of positions in different departments. I know that there are other recommendations, and I may not agree with all of them, but I really appreciate the time and attention you've spent and the consultant has spent to give us a plan for making the organization as effective as possible. And as Lauren said, there may be some specific recommendations that you bring back to us that we don't necessarily agree with, or some of the recommendations here that you don't agree with, but it really gives us a good starting place for having these discussions. So I wanted to thank you, and I'm fully in support of the recommendations you brought forward tonight.
All right, there is a, thank you, Councilmember Harmon. There is a motion, and I've seconded it. A motion by Councilmember Duran. Mark your votes.
Wait a minute, somebody's missing.
Passes 4-, what did you vote? 5-0. Thank you very much. We will now move on to item 5C, which is a discussion.
4C.
4C. Which is a discussion and of appointments to city council subcommittees. I think our city manager and city attorney and city clerk are going to do this.
Thank you, Mayor. So we brought this item back to you to appoint council members to an ad hoc subcommittee and 2 standing subcommittees. And the staff report speaks to the other 3 subcommittees, and they'll be brought back separately. We thought that bringing an item back from the department that is overseeing these projects would lean toward a more robust discussion to talk about what the tasks would be, how long it would take for those tasks to be completed, and what would be appropriate for the ad hoc committee. So for tonight, we will be looking at the 1343 Laurel Project Ad Hoc Subcommittee and talking about a date to dissolve that committee as well, and then the Homelessness Standing Subcommittee and the CSW Pride Standing Subcommittee.
All right, so shall we talk about 1343 Laurel?
Who's currently on it? Do they want to continue?
Yeah, I'd like to continue.
And I'd like to continue with Councilmember Meister.
And regarding the date to dissolve, is there
When do
some
I dissolve?
suggestion from our city clerk or our city attorney?
I know in speaking with staff, there was a conversation of having the ad hoc subcommittee assist in reviewing the upcoming feasibility study. And I think that that is moving forward. So maybe we start with 6 months and then see where we are with that.
Okay.
I would suggest we do it at the end of the year. And then next year in January, we can revisit that. Because, I mean, if you get this report, then it's going to take some time to think it over and have another meeting and get a staff report. And, I mean, unless there's some reason to limit the time.
I think as long as we're all aware that it's connected, the task is the feasibility study
Yeah,
and reviewing that,
absolutely.
and then when that's done,
But I mean,
this
if they
will
can't,
run its
if they're trying to
course.
get something on the agenda, but they can't have a meeting to get it on the agenda, we have to have a meeting to get the agenda to get this.
So we will set the date to 12/31/20.
Great.
Okay.
All right. The next item is the Homelessness Standing Subcommittee. I believe that's Councilmember
Heilman and I.
Heilman and
Yeah, I'd like to stay on it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, without objection. Okay. And the CSW Pride Standing Subcommittee, Councilmember Horvath?
I just have a question about how we can compel CSW to participate in a standing subcommittee. Or whether we can. Maybe we can't.
I don't know if we can compel them. I think that we are, they come to council for funding and.
For $2 billion, we can compel them.
I think if we schedule a meeting, somebody's going to show. I'm just guessing. But they don't have to. You're not compelled.
They're not part of the subcommittee. It would be to have their input on your discussion topics at the meetings.
And we can certainly put it in our agreement with them that, one of the expectations is that they would appear before the council and appear before
The subcommittee.
to
Great
discuss upcoming plans.
Just want to be clear about that.
Okay.
Thanks.
So I have been a member of that, and I would like to remain a member. And I know Councilmember Heilman, you
fine
are.
with remaining.
I know Mayor Pro Tem Horvath is not on any subcommittees. That may be your preference, given how busy you
On
are
everything
with
else.
so many other things.
I think I'm on every other subcommittee. These are the only three I'm not, so it's completely fine.
We're not, yeah. We'll get you on the next round. Yes. So these are standing, and there's, great. So do we have to vote on something?
No, we've appointed for the 1343 Laurel, Councilmember Meister, Councilmember Duran, and that subcommittee will dissolve at the end of the year. For the Homelessness Subcommittee, we have Councilmember Heilman and Councilmember Meister. And for the CSW Pride Subcommittee, we have Mayor D'Amico and Councilmember Heilman.
Great. It's like we went all the way around the block and came right back. Here we are. All right, we've gone through 5A, 5B, 6A. We will now go to 2N, which is an item from Mayor Pro Tem and I regarding statues for equality.
Mayor, I pulled this, and my comment is, I don't think we actually have any sculptures of males or females currently.
Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Okay, Rocky and Bullwinkle. One of the things I was going to suggest is that maybe this would be an appropriate, since we as a city don't have any sculptures of humans, to my knowledge, maybe that this would be something that would be part of our 1% for art policy, that as developers bring forth art and they want to include sculptures, that the 1% policy would suggest that there would be equal numbers of male and female representation. But that's, I think there's more work that's going to be done, so I just wanted to give that as a suggestion to our staff.
Without exception, I think it's fine to also include that as something that they discuss with the boards and commissions they're taking this to, and incorporate that into language if I think the larger idea was that we wanted to do a couple of things, and I don't want to mansplain women's sculptures, so I don't know if you would like to go ahead.
I would love for you to say it, Mayor.
All right. Well, please, get me out of this. Just start talking.
I got you. So there's currently a national movement to increase the visibility and recognition of women's historical accomplishments through public art, architecture, sculpture, and this is one way that the city is able to do that. Certainly, there are other ways that through our 1% art program that we can incorporate that as well. We were approached by artists who are interested in participating in this movement, and they have been donating their services to support communities who would like to commemorate the accomplishments of women's history in our community, in communities around the country. We did some initial comparison analysis of statues that have been recently unveiled in the region in terms of cost comparison, and also the review process for deciding what kind of sculptures might be appropriate for public review. Things like the sculptures recently of athletes at the Rose Bowl, for example. This would give us an opportunity to commemorate the accomplishments, not necessarily of just any woman, but women or a woman or whatever the Women's Advisory Board would advise, to publicly commemorate the accomplishments in history made that is important and significant to the community of West Hollywood. And I think as part of the commentary that has come in to the council, we certainly, I believe it was the mayor's and my intention to be inclusive in this process. And so we certainly would, while the Women's Advisory Board would be the initial board to help us develop what that process would be, I think we want to make sure that all boards are informed of what the Women's Advisory Board process would be, so all boards have the ability to have their voices be heard. We certainly know there are many different kinds of women in the community, and we wouldn't want any of the demographics of women in the community to be left out simply because they aren't members of the Women's Advisory Board. But the idea would be that we create a process, especially if these are public statues, that the Public Facilities Commission would weigh in, the Arts Commission may weigh in, and that the Women's Advisory Board would lead the way in creating something that's lasting in our community to commemorate the accomplishments of women in history. How'd I do, Mayor?
Fantastic. I would just add that, and it may be, there is an avenue in my mind to the end of these sets of discussions in which the city itself might invest in one of these sculptures. Either perhaps, as Councilmember Howland suggests, through a 1% of the arts, or just because in honor of something or number of things, it might be the right time and there might be the right place to do that. So, Councilmember Duran?
I wasn't going to say anything, but now I'm going to say something. So I think, while I understand the concept behind the item, I think statues are so last century. I don't know how else to say it. We don't have any statues in the city, and one of the reasons is we're 1.9 square miles. Any sort of public right-of-ways where you would normally see a statue, we already are battling pedestrians, bicyclists, scooters, pedestrians with such limited sidewalk space that I think this just really leaves parks and medians. And in my mind, I think there are far more creative ways of dealing with this. If we want to recognize the equality of women on the Sunset Strip, rather than having a statue to Joni Baez or somebody like that, there should be a women's music festival in some of the clubs to highlight the music of Joni Baez. Or if there was around Pride time to recognize the contributions from lesbian women and trans women, there are other ways of doing it through programming, through theater, through performing arts, through lecture, through film. And to me, statues are static. Birds poop on them. I mean, they don't draw the public's attention like I think they used to. And I think they've been most effective where there are public squares or public circles, and we have only a few of those citywide. And as my colleague, Councilmember Heilman, said, we don't have any statues out there. So I'm all for creating and having the Women's Advisory Board and the Public Facilities Commission and other boards and commissions look at a way to recognize the historic achievements of women in not only this community, but throughout our history. But I just hate to limit it with the idea of statues, because I think statues are just not where we are, not in the age of information, in the age of the internet, and the age of social media. A statue seems to be going backwards. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I like my colleagues, I support the idea of recognizing women's history and the contribution women make. I mean, that's why we have Women's History Month every year, and we have historically celebrated this. I think one of the problems I'm having with this is I'm not quite sure what the goal is. Is it to have a one-time, a permanent sculpture in the city of West Hollywood to make up for the fact that lots of other people, lots of other communities with sculptures primarily feature men? Is it to have a series of rotating sculptures, as our rotating art program has, that would regularly and routinely feature women? I think that our Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission and staff need to look at this, and I know that's part of the direction, but I would suggest that they take the lead on this and come back with a more formulated plan that takes into account some of the input that's been given tonight.
In preparing this item, we actually spoke with Andrew from Arts and Cultural Affairs and from the Arts Department, and he advised that the Public Facilities Commission be involved because it would be something that's in the public space. So I just want to acknowledge that we did go through that, and that was their recommendation. We do, while we might not have statues in the shape of people, we do have monuments throughout the city that do commemorate men. There are plaques everywhere. There's the Sal Guariello water feature at the park. There's the Russian War veterans monuments, plural, at Plummer Park. There's the Matthew Shepard Triangle plaque. There are markers throughout this community that commemorate, for very important and meaningful reasons to this community, many men. And so I don't think that this is about doing something that's last century. It's about something that lasts for the centuries and is something that actually commemorates in a visible way women's historic contributions that are meaningful to this community. So the idea is to go to our appointed bodies who do this work to have them come up with the appropriate process. So I'm fine with that direction. I think the idea, though, is to then it would certainly go through the board, the commissions, and then come back to council for final approval. This just kind of initiates that process.
And so it sounds like your goal here would be to have something that's a permanent marker, not necessarily for a particular historic woman, but to recognize the struggle for women's equality and the contributions that women have made generally to our community and to our nation. I
think it could be that. I don't want to give specific direction in either way. I mean, I think what we want to hear back, what I was interested in hearing back was from the Women's Advisory Board for them to conduct this process, gather public input, let people use Women's Advisory Board meetings to gather information, and then that can come back to us. But
I wouldn't use the Women's Advisory Board because of the cultural issue and the art issue. I think we need the people with that degree of expertise, and that's why I said I think they should be leading the charge with input from the Women's Advisory Board.
They're all included in the report, so anyone can take the lead, but all of them would be giving input as to what that contribution would look like and how it would manifest in our public space.
So I'm going to make the motion, and perhaps it will get seconded. There we go. And I would only say to all of us that I think this is probably the version of the conversation that will be had in potentially in many of our boards and commissions about how this, what this means, and how this can come to be or should not come to be. But I think to me, what's most fascinating is that that we have to have this conversation. So I think it seems like it's going to happen. It seems like maybe we're going to send this off to our boards and commissions, and we're going to ask them to have a robust discussion about how to represent women better in our cultural sphere, whether it's in a 5'9" sculpture of a woman we know, or a woman we wish we knew, or a woman who never lived, or just is the word woman. I don't know. But I think there is good reason to have this discussion about gender representation in cultural works in our city, and I hope it will pass. Councilmember Duran.
Since it looks like it's moving forward, I just want to make a couple of other comments. I think the direction that Councilmember Heilman was suggesting is a good one. If it's a piece of art or something that's permanent and commemorative about women, I think that's a little bit more inclusive. Otherwise, how do you pick between Susan B. Anthony, Harriet Tubman, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Jane Rowe, our own Jane Fonda, who's got a long history with this community, or Maria Shriver. I mean, we could end up with dozens of statues.
Not dozens.
Yeah,
Whoa,
dozens.
wait a minute. We
But-
don't want dozens
but-
of women in the city.
No, John, that's not the point. Here's the point. We have very limited public space. And we actually have a policy in the city that we don't even name anything for somebody until they've been dead for more than 5 years. We're really careful about how we make use of our public space so it doesn't become cluttered. And so I think as these boards and commissions are looking at this issue, they've got to look at our naming policy and our other policies around permanent installations, because the transgender Matthew Shepard transgender plaque isn't dedicated to any one transgender woman like Marsha Johnson or any transgender man. It's dedicated to the struggle of the trans community. The Matthew Shepard Triangle is dedicated to victims of hate crimes. It's not even dedicated to Matthew Shepard himself. And of course, the plaques along Santa Monica Boulevard that were referenced, those are all people who died of AIDS, and that's a policy that's been in place for a very long time. But the AIDS monument that we're doing is not dedicated to any one in particular, but to the struggle of all people that have been living with HIV and fighting HIV over the decades. So I think there's a way to create something that's inclusive and broad without being so limited to an individual. And I'm just worried about going down the rabbit hole of individual women and where that could take us. That's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Sean. Sorry for interrupting. I apologize. Councilmember Meister?
Yeah, I just want to confirm that the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission would be the commission that would take the lead. That would be the commission that takes the lead on this.
Yeah, I have no objection to that. Yeah.
I'm going to support this, but I think the intent of this is what you said, and what both of you said. How do we ensure equal representation of women in our cultural programming generally, and not just limited to statutes, because we really have very few of them? And then secondly, how can we celebrate the contributions of women to our community and to the nation in a more permanent way in the city? And those are the two things I would really like the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission and staff to investigate as part of this recommendation. And I think that's the sense of it.
Without objection. Okay. All right, let's cast our vote and get out into the next item. All right, 5-0. Thank you very much. We're now going to item 2U. Councilmember Horvath, or Mayor Pro Tem Horvath, and I have brought this proposed ordinance to prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products and the use of tobacco coupons and discounts. There are several speakers. I'm not sure. I hope you have all stuck around. Thank you all very much. There is a staff report. I don't know if my colleagues are interested in us describing any of it, so we'll just begin hearing from the speakers, Christopher Records and Arthur Corona. Thank you for sticking around this evening, everyone.
Good evening. It's good to see you all again. My name is Chris Records. I work with Equality California and represent the Out Against Big Tobacco Coalition, a group of LGBT community organizations working to reduce LGBTQ health disparities, especially tobacco use. I just want to provide a little bit of information on flavored tobacco and tobacco coupons and discounts, which are the issues at the heart of this proposed ordinance. Tobacco-related illness remains the #1 cause of death in both the general population and among LGBTQ people. Flavored and discount products contribute to the higher use of tobacco in the general population and among LGBTQ people, and also to the resulting illness and death. Research supports the finding that flavored tobacco products are attractive, especially to youth. 4 in 5 youth smokers report that the first tobacco product that they smoke was flavored. And there's a long history, in particular with flavored tobacco, of marketing in a predatory way to marginalized communities, especially the African American community, but also to LGBTQ people, which is one of the reasons why we see rates up to 75% of tobacco, flavored tobacco use among LGBTQ young smokers, and similar numbers in other communities. Coupons and discounts are similar marketing techniques, and there's significant evidence that youth are exposed at high rates to coupons, discounts, and advertising, and LGBTQ people, the research shows, are exposed at greater rates to these advertising products than the general population. So these are just some of the reasons why LA County has passed a ban on flavored tobacco, why LA City is considering a similar ban, and why this is up on the agenda today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Records. Arthur Corona, to be followed by Mike I.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm here this evening to urge you to reconsider your complete ban on the sale of flavored tobacco. I represent shop owners. Mainly, I'm also a shop owner who sells these products, and I would urge you to perhaps consider alternate forms of regulation. I think in a city like West Hollywood, who has been very progressive in its approach to the regulation of such things as cannabis, I think the regulation of what is now currently a legal product can be achieved. I don't think we need a draconian ban on something that citizens are asking for or requesting the sale of. I think if we can regulate the sale of what's essentially federally still illegal, meaning cannabis, we can certainly regulate the sale of tobacco. I think there's software that can be put into place to ensure that none of this flavored tobacco is put into the wrong hands, mainly the hands of minors. Before you take a complete ban, I would ask you to look at the financial effects that it has on small businesses and see if, in fact, there is alternate methods of regulation. I think banning this in one fatal swoop leads to perhaps a slippery slope. I think if we're looking at the fact that it's flavored, we have to look at flavored alcohol. We have to look at other flavored things that perhaps are damaging to one's health. The gentleman that spoke before me cited some studies, but without specificity. I would just add that we look at this a little more intently before just jumping on what's become a bandwagon of just saying no to something that may or may not be a current risk to the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Corona. Mike I, to be followed by John Hall.
Hello, Mayor and City Council. Nice to be here. My name is Mike I. I've been a long-term resident of West Hollywood for nearly a decade now. And I would like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Horvath and Mayor D'Amico for bringing this forward. I'm here representing myself. I work for Equality California also, but I'm here representing myself as a citizen of West Hollywood. The sale of flavored tobacco and nicotine products disproportionately harms LGBT individuals, especially teens and young adults. An estimated 40,000 Californians die every year because of smoking-related diseases. 2,000 of those are LGBTQ Californians. Smoking-related illness is the major driver of ill health among LGBT Californians and is the leading cause of death in our community. The U.S. Surgeon General has warned that flavored tobacco products help new users establish habits that lead to long-term addiction. Flavors like menthol or mango or strawberry make it harder for users to quit. All nicotine products are addictive and increase the risk of developing serious health problems, including cancer, heart disease, and emphysema. And the gentleman before mentioned some not having sources. Happy to provide that in a separate one page. Now, over 80% of youth and young adult tobacco users have reported using flavored tobacco. 3/4 of flavored tobacco product users said they would no longer use the product if it was not legal. LA County has already banned the sale of flavored tobacco. Beverly Hills has done it. San Francisco has done it. I'd like to see West Hollywood do it. And to the retailers that are out there saying that this ordinance would shut down their business, find something else to sell. Stop profiting off of our death. Please vote yes, move this ordinance forward, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. I. John Hall, to be followed by Manny Morabi.
Hello, my name is John Hall. I'm a 47-year resident of West Hollywood. and I'm here to support my friend Manny, who's going to speak later. I think this kind of, personally, I think this kind of legislation is ridiculous because you can't legislate who's going to take grape cigarettes. You just can't. If your mom and dad can't do it, Lauren Meister's not going to do it either. I like the idea of having some, we're going to put a line in the sand here and not allow anything more to do, but I think that it's kind of important that you consider the people who are running businesses in this neighborhood, in this city, and changing the rules on them. I visit Smoke for Less every single day. Every day I go and buy my pack of addictive cigarettes, hating myself, but nonetheless, that's how I can function. For Manny trying to keep his business alive, I recognize the problem. Within 1.5 blocks of his business are 5 empty shops. It's too fragile an atmosphere for you to all of a sudden come down with a dictum going, we're not going to sell this shit anymore. I think you've got to try to grandfather, perhaps, the existent businesses that do this, that started their thing legally, and see if that can't help Manny. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Manny Morabi to be followed by Casey Dickerson.
Good evening, council members. My name is Manny Morabi. I'm the owner of Smoke for Less, located on Santa Monica and La Jolla. I've been a tobacco retailer in the city of West Hollywood for the past 12 years. I've taken tobacco prevention with youth very seriously. Since we have opened, we have never been given a citation by any agency for any underage sale, and I take pride in that. We have implemented our own secret shopper program as an extra measure to prevent the sale of tobacco to the youth. I do agree there's been a huge epidemic in the teen vape use. I'm asking the council for an opportunity to work with us, the retailers, so we can all come together with this common goal of preventing sale to minor tobacco products and still keep small businesses alive like mine. Banning flavored tobacco completely would close our doors, bankrupt me, and leave my longtime employees without a job. It's heartbreaking. I don't think banning flavored tobacco is the right solution. We could have better policies and regulations. If we all work together, we could not only save the youth, but save hardworking mom and pop shops like me. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morabi. Casey Dickerson to be followed by Steve Martin. Casey, Steve Martin, followed by Donnie Casey. Mr. Casey, yes. Mr. Casey is our last speaker. If anyone else wishes to speak, please let yourself be known and we'll hear you.
Mayor and City Council members, my name is Donnie Casey, owner of the 7-Eleven on the east side. I'm here to speak on the banning of the flavor of e-cigarettes and tobacco. The state just banned flavored pots this month, so everyone isn't allowed to sell them. What you're trying to do is take the revenue from business in WeHo and send it to surrounding cities that's out of the 1.9 square miles of WeHo. I know the city don't need the money, they have plenty of revenue, but what about the law-abiding businesses you are going to be hurting? Unless the city is willing to subsidize the businesses for their loss, and not wait and let the state do it, and let the state ban it everywhere. Why not go after the ones who are selling to the minors, the online sales to anyone who says they are over 21? Again, let the state ban everything. Everyone, don't hurt the businesses in WeHo.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Some citizen position slips.
Yes, the following people did not wish to speak or wanted to express their opposition to the recommended item. Brad Shearer, West Hollywood. Denise Alawas, West Hollywood.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Duran.
Thank you, Mayor. I pulled this item for discussion tonight. I want to thank everybody who came out to speak tonight, and I don't agree with this particular item, and let me state my reasons. First of all, tobacco and vaping is now prohibited for anyone under the age of 21. So this is not a youth item. It's being proposed as something that affects youth. It's not. It's one group of adults against another group of adults. And when that happens, whether it's from the left or from the right, it always causes me some concern when other people attempt to tell one group of people what the good life is supposed to look like, rather than letting individuals make decisions for themselves, even really bad decisions. I don't smoke, I don't drink, I don't do drugs anymore. I have done all those things in my younger days when I used to party on the Strip back in the 1970s, and of course the gay clubs in the 1980s. I did all those things. And it was part of my feeling free in a place that I knew to be the heartbeat of adult nightlife in Southern California, the adult excitement of the Sunset Strip, the glamour of Sunset or Santa Monica Boulevards. It was part of my rite of passage as a young person. I understand the arguments about public health. I do. And I know that it's government's role to take up issues regarding public health. But sometimes I think government can go too far and intrude into the private lives of people when we try to regulate human behavior. I would be all for going after the demand side of this. There's supply and demand. This is an attack on the supply side. If you really want to change long-term adult usage of alcohol or tobacco or drugs, any of those things, you have to hit the demand side. Because somebody who wants to find these items will find them, will find their cigarettes, will find their vaping equipment, will find their booze, will find their cannabis, will find their drugs. If we really want to do something about cutting back smoking in the LGBT community, the focus should be on the demand side and not on the supply side. I'm perplexed that we just approved smoking lounges for cannabis across the city of West Hollywood, and now we're attempting to decline those same adults who can walk into a smoking lounge and vape or smoke the ability to buy the exact same product or something similar to the product to do in the privacy of their own homes. It is illogical to me. It is inconsistent for us to support the creation of smoking lounges, hookah bars for our Middle Eastern community, and then attempt to do this to our ma and pa retailers. Now, I'm one of the co-founders of Equality California. I started the organization, and I appreciate EQCA being here and all the great work that EQCA does. But before we started Equality California, there's been a West Hollywood here for 100 years. 100 years of nightlife and party and cabaret and underground nightclubs and underground booze and people smoking weed and drinking too much and partying on the Strip or down on Santa Monica Boulevard. And this is an attempt that strikes at part of our community culture. Whether or not I engage in it anymore isn't the point. It is part of the culture, 100 years of culture of the city of West Hollywood. I know sometimes people say, John, you belong to the old history of West Hollywood. Maybe so. But I hope that moving forward, West Hollywood will always be a place where adults can figure out what's best for them, rather than having the nanny state of the left or the nanny state of the right attempting to tell them what to do. Because that's when individual liberties get trampled. And I know that's ultimately what this is, a balance between public health and the rights of people who want to stay away from cigarette smoke versus those who wish to consume it. That's the ultimate public policy debate. But in the middle of all that, we have our ma and pa retailers some of whom spoke tonight. And as they stated, us doing this just means people are going to go to Los Angeles next door to make the exact same purchase. So on the Strip, if you walk the Strip, there are liquor stores, there are tobacco shops, there are psychics, there's an occasional Subway, and then there's the music industry. That is at least the western end of the Strip where I live. In essence, you're attempting to shutter the windows of some of the businesses that make up the quilt and the fabric of the Sunset Strip, whether or not you patronize them. This item goes too far. It even goes after menthol-flavored cigarettes. Wait until the people who still smoke in West Hollywood discover they can't even buy a pack of menthol at their local 7-Eleven or their local tobacco shop. So in my mind, I understand the policy around public health, but there's another policy at stake here, and that is, this is a community with 5% children. It is a community of grown-ups and adults who have the capability to decide what's best for themselves and to find the good life as they see fit. I don't even wish to have this discussed or considered. I think that we should reject it as inconsistent with our West Hollywood culture, and I intend to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Duran. Councilmember Meister.
Yep, thank you. I just have a lot of questions that I don't think have been answered. We put forward, I guess it was about a year ago, a program with the retailers with the signage. So do we have any idea, have we gotten numbers on how that's working so far with regard to illegal sales to minors? We have a grant. Have we put forward an education campaign that, as we discussed at that time? Is LA County, the LA County include menthol as well, or is it just flavored cigarettes? What do we do about, I believe that there are vapes that don't have nicotine, that are just flavored vapes, or is that included? There are vapes for cannabis that are flavored, so we're not including those, but we're including vapes, flavored vapes for tobacco, but not cannabis. I guess I just feel like we have a lot of, for me, there are a lot of questions that haven't been answered, and I think rather than saying, write this ordinance and then send it to Business License Commission, that maybe this should go to Business License Commission to discuss this, to get the answers to these questions, to see how the city efforts are working so far with regard to illegal sales to minors from the item that was brought forward a year or so ago regarding signage, et cetera. And I'm concerned about the menthol because it is disproportionately used by African Americans and LGBT and women. I'm concerned that the discounts, it's not really clear because it's my understanding that a pack of cigarettes may have a discount, maybe discounted right on the packaging as opposed to an actual coupon, so does it apply to that? So I just feel like there are just a lot of things that haven't been thought about. So to say, let's write an ordinance rather than let's discuss this further, let's look at our efforts and see how our efforts have been working so far. And to be very clear, is this targeting youth or is this targeting our 21-plus adult population? So I can't support this as is. I can support an item going to Business License Commission or our I don't know if it would be appropriate for Human Services, but to have that discussion and to follow up on what actions we've taken so far, because I don't know where we haven't gotten anything back on what we've done so far.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a continuation of efforts that actually started from members of our community. The city had an F rating in terms of access to tobacco for youth. and access to tobacco and tobacco use overall. This has come from concerns of members of the community with regard to the impact on quality of life and health, whether it's Equality California as an organization, American Cancer Society, American Lung Association. From my point of view, the science is clear that tobacco is a significant risk to one's health for LGBTQ people, for seniors, for youth. We have a community-wide commitment to helping people with addiction, and this falls in that category. We have partnered with the California Attorney General to get help for our enforcement of some of our smoking cessation efforts. But there are more efforts that the city has put forward along these lines for those reasons. I understand that there are financial costs to making such a decision. There are also financial and quality of life and health costs by continuing to allow these products that are literally killing our community with endless amounts of money being targeted towards specifically the demographics of people in our community to continue to use them. And we even had a speaker here tonight come and say he hates himself for going to purchase tobacco every day, but and that's sad for me to hear. I understand it's his right to go, purchase tobacco and continue to consume it. But I also think it's our responsibility to continue to help people who are trying to quit and to take a look at what are those significant contributors to the risks that we have seen to public health. And every study is clear. Flavored tobacco products and access to discounts that circumvent the consequences that the state has put into place as financial consequences to discourage people from using tobacco. Those are two of the most significant determining factors, especially for people to start at a young age and become lifelong addicts. The tobacco companies want to see them as lifelong customers and take their money for as long as possible, but what they're actually taking are their lives. And I think that's the point of view that I'm coming from. I certainly understand that people may choose to do that. They may choose to use tobacco, but I think what we are seeing in the community are its harmful effects. And increasingly throughout the region, and even we see in both housing and in businesses in West Hollywood, a choice to go smoke-free because that is the desire of patrons or residents or both, to create more smoke-free environments in order to enjoy the nightlife establishments that are out there. I've even recently been contacted by owners of nightlife establishments who were very opposed to the smoking ban back in 2010, who are begging for us to make all venues smoke-free now in West Hollywood. I don't know that that's the direction this is intending to go, because we have been a nightlife city that allows adults to enjoy many things. But I do think that what we're identifying here is retail access to tobacco has created significant risks for the people in our community we say we're trying to protect on a daily basis. So I think that's the intention behind it. Certainly, today's decision would set us on a path. There would be time between giving, staff coming up and drafting an ordinance, having it be reviewed at Business License Commission for maybe some of the comments that my colleagues have brought up, to make sure that all facts and information are being considered certainly before it comes back to the council. So this is to sort of initiate that process, and certainly our businesses can be a part of that conversation. But I think what we need to be clear about is what is the goal we're trying to achieve here. And this isn't just about youth. We're hearing from adult members of our LGBTQ community. We're hearing from adult seniors in our community, that the harmful impacts of tobacco and their quality of life and their day-to-day life need to be addressed, and they want us as the city council to address them. So I think that that's the step we're trying to take with this item tonight. Thanks.
Councilmember Meister?
Yeah, just to follow up, do we know if LA County included menthol in their ordinance?
I don't know, but that would be, we'd certainly want to know. if we move forward, we would certainly want to make sure that we had input about that.
Yeah, so I'd like to know about that. I also, this is really not about a smoke-free environment, it's about limiting access, and I agree that access should be limited when it comes to minors. And I guess I still can't get past the part of, we approved consumption lounges for cannabis where people will be smoking, and smoke-filled rooms and flavored this and that, and yet that's okay, and this isn't. I don't understand that. So do we want to go ahead right now and just say, let's ban all flavored vapes and pre-rolled cigarettes and joints and everything else? I mean, is that? That's not what the item is. No, I understand that's not the item, but that's an item of fairness here, that we should have this discussion. I also don't understand why we still allow smoking in our parks where our teens and our children are, why we can't get smoking out of our parks. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Thank you.
Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who spoke tonight, and thank you for bringing this forward. I agree that this proposal doesn't address all the harmful effects of smoke or all the various products that might cause a danger to people, but as a council, we're allowed to address problems one step at a time. We don't necessarily have to address every single problem. I would be in favor, as I've indicated before, of providing smoke-free apartments and allowing landlords to gradually go smoke-free, and condo associations as well. And I fully support making our parks smoke-free. I also support making other areas of our community smoke-free, such as the outdoor areas of nightclubs, which aren't that outdoor anymore. They're mainly fully enclosed. But with respect to the item in front of us, we're not saying that businesses need to shut down. We're talking about restricting the sale of a particular product that we know is often used to get young people hooked on tobacco. And whether they're minors or whether they're young adults, we know that those are the people who are targeted and who often become addicted and then have a lifelong addiction to tobacco. This is about public health in my mind. There's nothing beneficial about tobacco. We know the dangers. And my colleague, Councilmember Duran, waxed eloquently about the past 100 years ago, I might add. But
when he was 17.
We know that a lot
We were
of,
there, weren't we?
I was there. We know that a lot of things have changed. We know a lot more about the damaging effects of tobacco. We know a lot more about the tactics that are used by tobacco companies to lure people into addiction. And since that, we've taken steps. We've banned smoking in restaurants. We heard that that was going to destroy our restaurants. It didn't. We banned smoking in nightclubs in the indoor portions of it. It didn't destroy our nightlife. We still have a very vibrant nightlife, very creative nightlife. People in the city overwhelmingly do not smoke, and they don't support smoking. And they're looking to us as a council to provide leadership. And instead, we're lagging behind what other communities are doing. I think in terms of sending this to the Business License Commission for input, I don't think that's necessary. We have an ordinance from the county. We have other cities who have adopted similar ordinances. We can provide that ordinance, adapt it to West Hollywood, and bring it before the commission for their recommendations, and bring it to the council for introduction and hopefully approval. I know it has an impact on businesses, but The point of this is to protect our residents from the dangerous impacts of tobacco, and I'm going to support that over the interests of the business community.
Mayor Pro Tem Horwath, can I just say one thing? I think I agree with Councilmember Heilman. I would just want to make sure that we engage with our Chamber of Commerce. I think often when we take these kinds of steps, we hear that they didn't hear about it and we didn't contact them, and so I think if it's direction from us, that will happen first, and then when it's time to have this discussion again, we won't have to wait to do that.
I think we also should, I'm sorry I cut you off, but we should have a phase out plan for these businesses. So I'm sure some of them have substantial amounts of inventory. Obviously, we can't do this immediately. It's going to take some time.
I just wanted to respond. I got the information sent to me about the LA County ban, which the vote took place last October. The LA County ban included flavored tobacco products, e-cigarettes, chewing tobacco, and menthol cigarettes amid concerns that the products appeal to young people. The county board also voted to adopt, in addition to adopting the ban, they voted to call on the governor to pass a statewide ban as vaping health concerns continue.
And I just wanted to, I know we've sort of made this point, but I wanted to say that one of the differences between cigarettes and cannabis are that cigarettes have approximately 600 ingredients. Cannabis typically has 1. When burned, cigarettes create 7,000 chemicals. 69 of those chemicals are known to cause cancer, and many are toxic. And perhaps many decades from now, we will find out more about cannabis after, again, having widespread use, but as I know it, there are not the same sort of cancer rates. In fact, many people use cannabis as medicine to help them with their cancer, and certainly we know for a fact that cigarettes cause cancer. Seeing that there are no more speakers, we have a motion by Mayor Pro Tem Horwath, and I have seconded. Would like to take our votes. And the motion passes 3-1 with 1 abstention. I believe that is the last item on our agenda,
We have one public speaker.
minus our final public speaker. And that person is, if you want to just say their name, they'll come up.
George Bojarski.
George. Bojarski, good evening, George. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. George Bojarski, live in WeHo. Last time I was commenting about the uselessness of the current provision, only provision that I know of, to try and regulate dust as it comes off of construction sites. And I think it was also talking about something that is a health and welfare issue. Not everybody goes to work and then comes back when the dust has settled, right? This is not something that's going to go away. We are developing and redeveloping faster than ever. And so for the building across the way, for the first 3 days, the existing method was tried, totally useless. I'd like to send you a couple of photographs. And on the 4th day, the manager in charge went to method B, went to something that worked. All you do is you just leave the dirt dry. You scoop it up, you put it in a truck. From an elevated position, you spray the truck load. It provides a real skin of armor against drift. And then you cover the truck with a tarp, okay? There really isn't great additional cost to this. And I don't think the businesses or the developers would mind if this developer changed track and, in the middle of the stream. And I think now is a good time for the council to really, I don't think you need a consultant for this, to just consider doing something, because right now, for some reason, everything is totally frozen. There's been, at least for residential buildings, nothing is moving, right? And even if it was moving, as a matter of health and welfare, it could just come in at any time, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Boyarski. And that is our last public speaker.
Can we ask the city manager to follow up on that request?
I know that staff has met with George in the past, so I'll follow up with Danny Weavis tomorrow.
Thank you.
And I would just, I didn't want to, I was going to talk to you afterwards. That's actually part of the AQMD standards for construction, and it's part of the California Code. All of those things are adopted with every development agreement that we adopt and every set of permits that get stamped. It's California Code, something, something, something. So every construction site should be engaging in exactly wetting down the truck and covering it before it leaves the site. But I know we will have somebody from code compliance check into it. Let me finish tonight's meeting and then I will talk to you. We will meet again on March 2nd at 6:30 p.m. in this room, the West Hollywood Park Public Meeting Room, the council chambers. Good night, everyone.